I'm a simple, honest man. I don't understand mind games or hidden agendas. All I ever wanted was to marry a woman and build a peaceful life with her. So after I married Willow, a fallen heiress whose family had lost everything, I gave her my whole heart and everything I had. That year, her father jumped to his death after a failed investment, and her mother suffered a mental breakdown and was committed to a psychiatric hospital. I was the one who held their crumbling empire together and turned the company around single-handedly. And yet, on our 5th wedding anniversary, while I was happily bustling around the kitchen, cooking up a surprise dinner for her, Willow sent me a message. It read, "He's back. Let's get divorced." It came completely out of nowhere. It made absolutely no sense. Stunned, I instinctively asked, "Your father's back. Does he disapprove of our marriage?" She replied, "My true love is back." I flew into a rage. She wanted a divorce? Not a chance in hell. In my dictionary, marriage only ended in widowhood. Divorce did not exist. Chapter 1. When she asked for a divorce, the water in the pot had just begun to boil. I stared at the words on my phone screen and read them 3 times, making sure I hadn't misunderstood. "He's back. Let's get divorced." That was all. No build-up, no explanation. She hadn't even addressed me by name. I stared at the message for so long that the water boiled over and extinguished the flame. The kitchen filled with the scorched smell of burning cast iron. Today was our wedding anniversary. Our 5th. I had taken the day off and had been busy since morning. I made sweet and sour ribs, braised prawns, stir-fried vegetables, and tofu with crab roe, her favorite. That last dish was a nightmare to prepare. The crabs had to be taken apart fresh. I crouched in the kitchen and picked the meat and roe from 4 hairy crabs. Their shells cut my fingers twice, but I simply covered the wounds with bandages and kept going. I set the table, lit candles, and even went to a florist to buy a bouquet of white roses. She liked white roses. I didn't know why. In truth, I had never really known what she liked. After 5 years, even the foods she enjoyed were things I had figured out by quietly observing her. She never told me any of it. She was always unfailingly polite to me, as though I were a roommate she shared an apartment with or a business associate she barely knew. Early that morning, I had texted her, "Are you coming home for dinner tonight? I made something." She replied, "I'm in a meeting." I sent another message, "Do you remember what day it is?" She didn't answer. 2 hours later, I received that single line, "He's back. Let's get divorced." I put down my phone and sat at the dining table. The candles had already burned halfway down. White wax had dripped onto the tablecloth and hardened into pale streaks. All the food had gone cold. A greasy film had formed over the sauce on the sweet and sour ribs, and the shells of the braised prawns had become dry and hard. I stared at the table full of food and suddenly found the whole thing ridiculous. "George, what the hell are you doing? Did you really think one homemade dinner would make her look at you differently? Did you think that after waiting for 5 years, she would finally start treating you like her husband? Stop dreaming." I stood up and carried the dishes into the kitchen one by one, dumping everything into the trash. The plates clattered against each other with a piercing sound, and sauce splattered everywhere. I threw away the bouquet of white roses too. Petals scattered across the floor. I stepped over them, crushing them into pale scraps beneath my feet. Then I returned to the dining table and poured myself a glass of baijiu. It wasn't anything expensive, just a cheap bottle from the supermarket that cost a little over 10. Willow never allowed me to drink it at home. She said the smell was too harsh and made the apartment reek like a roadside food stall. She said people from high society didn't drink things like that. I usually listened to her. I kept the red wine she liked at home and learned to swirl the glass, let the wine breathe, and smell its aroma exactly the way she had taught me. But honestly, I could never taste the difference between any of them. This was what I liked. Strong, harsh, and cheap, just like me. The moment I swallowed the first glass, my stomach began to burn. My phone lit up again. It was her. "I'm coming home tonight. We need to talk." I let out a laugh. "Coming home? How did you still have the nerve to come back here?" I replied with a single word, "Fine." Then I set down my glass, walked into the living room, and sat on the sofa. I didn't turn on the lights. I blew out the candles as well. The entire apartment sank into darkness, illuminated only by the faint glow of the city outside the windows. I sat there and waited for her to come home. I waited for my wife to return and discuss our divorce with me. All because the men she had been waiting for had finally come back. Chapter 2. Makoto. I had heard that name before. I had known about him for 5 years. Back then, after the Liu family went bankrupt, Willow Liu came to me and told me about her situation quite frankly. She said she had an ex-boyfriend named Makoto. She said they had broken up and would never have anything to do with each other again. She said she needed someone who could help her hold her family together. She said she had chosen me. At the time, I thought she was refreshingly honest. She didn't hide anything or play games. She simply said whatever was on her mind. Looking back now, I was a fucking idiot. She wasn't being honest. She simply didn't think I mattered. She didn't care whether I knew about him or not, because in her eyes, I was nothing more than a temporary substitute, a stepping stone, a tool to help her survive the crisis, a pathetic simp who became helpless the moment he saw her beautiful face. And the worst part was, that was exactly what I had been. I leaned back against the sofa and closed my eyes. In the darkness, I could hear my own breathing, heavy and ragged, like an enraged beast. I had no idea how much time had passed before I heard the door open, the sound of a key turning in the lock, the click of high heels against the floor. The lights came on. I opened my eyes. She stood by the door in a beige trench coat, with a white blouse and a fitted black pencil skirt underneath. Her hair was pinned up, her makeup flawless, and a pair of pearl studs adorned her ears. 5 years had passed, yet she hadn't changed at all. She was still just as beautiful, and just as cold. When she saw me sitting on the sofa, she frowned slightly. "Why didn't you turn on the lights?" I didn't answer. "You didn't even change your shoes when you came in. You've dirted the carpet, and the housekeeper will have to clean it tomorrow." I still said nothing. She walked over and sat on the sofa beside mine, setting her handbag down to one side. Her legs were pressed together and angled elegantly to the side. Her posture was so perfect that she looked like an illustration in an etiquette manual. When she saw the empty liquor bottle and glass on the table, her frown deepened. "You drank that stuff again?" "Yeah. How many times have I told you?" I cut her off. "Aren't you here to ask for a divorce?" She paused. Then her expression returned to its usual calm. "Yes. Why?" "I already told you in the message. I want to hear you say it to my face." She was silent for a few seconds before saying, "He's back, Makoto." "Yes. And that means you want a divorce?" "Yes." Her tone was perfectly calm, as though she were commenting on the pleasant weather, as though something like divorce wasn't even worth the slightest emotional reaction from her. I stared at her. "Willow, we've been married for 5 years. I know. Have I ever done anything to betray you during those 5 years? No. Have I ever treated you badly? No. Then what gives you the right?" She raised her eyes and looked at me. I knew that gaze all too well. Distant, restrained, and polite. She had looked at me that way for 5 straight years. "George, ours was a marriage of convenience from the very beginning. We both got what we needed." I frowned. "We both got what we needed. You needed my family background and connections, and I needed your money. After these 5 years, I don't owe you anything." I laughed. "You don't owe me anything." "Willow, did you just say you don't owe me anything?" I stood and looked down at her. 5 years ago, the Liu family went bankrupt. Your father jumped to his death, and your mother was committed to a psychiatric hospital. Not one person from your precious high society circle reached out to help you. And Makoto, your so-called true love, fled faster than a rabbit. He went straight overseas without even bothering to call you. You came to me and said you needed 5 million. 5 million. My family received a total of 2 million in compensation when our home was demolished for redevelopment. I gave you 5 million of it. You said it was a loan and that you would pay me back. You said you needed someone to help keep the Liu family company afloat. You said you chose me because you believed I was dependable, and I believed you. I gave you everything I had. I went with you to business dinners, helped you build connections, and accompanied you while you begged people for help one by one. I knew they looked down on me. They laughed at me for smacking my lips when I ate, for having no fashion sense, and for speaking with an accent. I didn't care about any of that, because you told me you sincerely wanted to build a life with me. But what about you? I bent down and planted both hands on the sofa's armrest beside her, trapping her between my body and the couch. "During these past 5 fucking years," I said, "how many times have you even slept with me?" Chapter 3. Her expression shifted slightly. "Why are you pretending to be so above it all? Do you think I don't know what's been going through your mind? I thought you just needed time to warm up to me. I thought you were naturally distant. I thought that if I waited long enough, you would eventually start treating me like your husband. But what happened? You were waiting for him, weren't you?" At last, a crack appeared in her expression. "You don't know anything," Willow replied. "I don't." I stared at her. "Then tell me." She said nothing. "Willow, I'm going to ask you one question. In the past 5 years, have you ever told me a single honest word?" She remained silent for a long time. Then she said, "My lawyer will discuss the divorce with you." She stood, picked up her bag, and turned toward the door. "Stop." Her footsteps paused. "You're staying here tonight," I said. "I don't want to." "This isn't about what you want," I interrupted. "This is our home. You're my wife." She turned around and stared at me. "Have you lost your mind?" "No, I've just finally seen things clearly." "Seen what clearly?" "That you've never treated me like a human being." She took a deep breath. "George, don't do this. We can end things amicably. We can negotiate the division of our assets." "Negotiate what?" I cut her off. "What gives you the right to negotiate with me? What makes you think you're in any position to set conditions?" "Willow, if it hadn't been for me 5 years ago, you would have ended up on the streets. That company of yours would have been swallowed whole. without even the bones left behind. The only reason you can stand here today and ask me for a divorce is because I used 5 million to drag you out of that pit. And now that your old flame is back, you think you can just kick me aside? Fine. You want a divorce? You can have one. But everything goes to me. The company, the house, the cars, the savings, every last cent. You walk away with nothing. Her eyes widened sharply. Willow bit her lip. Have you gone insane? I laughed. Didn't you say he was back? Doesn't he love you? Then let him support you. Go to him the same way you came to me back then. Her expression finally changed. The cold, restrained mask she had always worn shattered completely. George, you're going too far. I'm going too far. I laughed. Willow, which one of us is really being unreasonable here? She stared at me for a long moment. Then she stormed out and slammed the door behind her. The sound of her high heels gradually faded down the hallway. I stood there for a while before slowly sinking back onto the sofa. The apartment fell silent again. I picked up my phone and checked the time. 11 at night. I opened a social media app and made a post. Happy 5th anniversary. Attached was a photo of the dinner I had dumped into the trash. I set the post to private. Only I could see it. Willow didn't come home for 3 days. On the 4th day, a courier arrived at the door. He delivered a brown envelope containing a divorce agreement. I sat at the dining table and read through it page by page. There were several pages packed with dense legal clauses. But the main point was simple. I would receive all the marital assets except for the company, plus an additional 5 million in cash as compensation. She didn't want the house, the cars, or the savings. She only wanted the company. I stared at the agreement and laughed. Willow, you really know how to calculate your gains and losses. 5 years ago, that company had been nothing but a hopeless mess. I was the one who poured money into it and brought it back to life. I was the one who called in favors and built its connections. I was the one who supported it every step of the way until it began generating more than 10 million in annual profits. And now you wanted to simply pluck it from my hands. Since you've chosen to be heartless, don't blame me for showing you no mercy. Chapter 4. I picked up my phone and called her. It rang 3 times before she answered. Did you receive the agreement? Willow asked. I did. Read through the terms. If there aren't any problems, there are. She paused. What's the problem? Everything. The other end of the line went silent for several seconds. George, I've already made major concessions. Concessions? I leaned back in my chair. Willow, you call that a concession? You started that company with my money, and I spent 5 years building it with you. Now you want a divorce. You take the company, and you give me 5 million. So basically, I worked for you for free for 5 years. The 5 million is the original amount you invested. Is 5 million 5 years ago worth the same as 5 million today? Housing prices have multiplied several times over. I can add more. I already told you. All the assets go to me, and you walk away with nothing. Silence fell on the other end. George, the company is mine. I laughed. Legally, it's marital property. My father left it to me. What your father left you was an empty shell buried in debt. How are you going to prove it was your separate property? With a prenuptial property agreement. Back then, you couldn't even afford the notarization fee. She said nothing. Willow, let's stop dancing around it and speak plainly. You want a divorce? Fine. But it happens on my terms. You leave with nothing. And every asset goes to me. If you think that's unfair, then don't get divorced. A long time passed before she finally spoke. Do you think dragging this out will make me change my mind and come back to you? I froze. George, no matter how long you delay it, I will never love you. Then she hung up. I held the phone and listened to the busy signal. Suddenly, my chest felt unbearably tight. Not because she had said she would never love me, but because I had known that all along. I had simply refused to admit it. I put down my phone, stood, and walked onto the balcony. It was already late autumn, and the night wind cut straight to the bone. I lit a cigarette and stared at the city lights outside. The city was enormous and dazzling, but none of it had anything to do with me. I had never truly belonged here. 5 years ago, I had still been a resident of an urban village awaiting demolition. My parents had died young, leaving me an old house. When the area was redeveloped, I received 5.2 million in compensation. 5.2 million. To rich people, it was nothing. It wasn't even enough to buy one of their homes. But to me, it was an astronomical amount. I had never left the urban village my entire life. My parents sold vegetables at the market. Every morning at 3, they went to the wholesale market to buy stock, then worked until 8 or 9 at night before closing their stall. We lived in a 2-story house they had built themselves. Downstairs were my parents' bedroom and the living room. Upstairs were my bedroom and a storage room. The roof leaked in summer, and cold air seeped through the walls in winter. My father's greatest dream was to save enough money to buy a proper apartment in the city. He never lived to see that day. By the time the compensation money arrived, he had already been gone for 3 years. When I received it, I was completely overwhelmed. I had no idea what to do with that much money. Back then, I earned only $4,000 a month working as a document controller at a construction site. Then, out of nowhere, I had more than $5 million. My first thought was to buy an apartment. I visited several new developments, and the saleswomen all looked at me strangely. I was still wearing my work uniform from the construction site, with mud on my shoes. They probably thought I was only there to look around for fun. Just as I was hesitating over whether to buy one, I met Willow. Chapter 5. It happened at a dinner gathering. I had followed a construction contractor there, hoping to meet more people and find more work opportunities in the future. Willow sat in the corner. She wore a simple black dress without any jewelry, yet her presence was completely different from everyone else in the private room. She sat there like a piece of porcelain accidentally abandoned at a second-hand market. Someone told me she was the eldest daughter of the Liu family. The Liu family. I had seen that name in the newspapers before. They were once the largest textile company in the area, a business that had enjoyed great glory. But by then, things had already fallen apart. Her father's investment had failed. He was buried under billions in debt and ended his own life. Her mother suffered a mental breakdown and was admitted to a psychiatric hospital. She was left alone to hold together a company that was already falling apart. At the time, I only glanced at her once and quickly looked away. People like her and people like me lived in completely different worlds. I spent that dinner feeling extremely nervous, afraid that I would use the wrong chopsticks and become someone's joke. Later, she went to the restroom, and coincidentally, I happened to go as well. She stopped me in the hallway. "Are you George?" I froze. How did she know my name? "I looked into you," she said. "I heard you have some spare money. I want to discuss a partnership with you." "What kind of partnership?" "I need $5 million. I almost choked on my own saliva. $5 million. "Yes. Why would I give that to you?" She looked at me with bright, determined eyes. "Because I can marry you." At that moment, I thought she was crazy. A wealthy heiress wanted to marry someone like me, a guy who came from a construction background, just for $5 million. My instincts told me something was wrong. I turned around to leave. Behind me, she said, "I know you don't trust me, but think about it. What do you have to lose? What you'll gain is the Liu family's connections, social circle, and resources. What you're buying with this money is an entry ticket." I stopped walking. An entry ticket. Those words hit me. I turned back and looked at her. "You're serious? You can investigate everything about me, my family's situation, my company's situation. I'll tell you everything." I asked, "What do you need the $5 million for?" "To pay off the most urgent debt. The rest will be used to revive the company." "Can the company really be saved?" She said, "With me here, it can." When she said that, her eyes were full of certainty. It wasn't fake confidence. She truly believed it. I stayed silent for a long time before asking, "What are your conditions?" She said, "I only have one condition. You treat me well, and I'll treat you well. We'll start over. Neither of us will look down on the other. I won't ask about your past, and you won't ask about mine. We'll get married and live a good life together." She stood under the dim yellow light of the hallway and spoke with complete seriousness. I believed her. Only later did I realize that her definition of living a good life together was completely different from mine. I thought it meant eating together, talking together, and building a life side by side. She thought it meant I provided the money. She built the business, and we lived our own separate lives. Chapter 6. Married life was nothing like I had imagined. I thought that once two people got married, they became a family. I thought that if I gave her my whole heart, she would eventually see it. I thought that given enough time, affection would naturally grow between us. During our first year of marriage, I accompanied her from one client meeting to another. Those clients were all seasoned businessmen. The moment they saw someone inexperienced, they tried to squeeze the price as low as possible. Willow was too proud to compromise. The moment she refused to budge, they would lose their tempers and threaten to leave. I would stop them and invite them out for drinks. I wasn't good with words, but I knew how to make people feel comfortable. I poured their drinks, offered them cigarettes, and flattered them. I knew they looked down on me. They thought I was nothing more than a man who had married into the Liu family. That was fine. They could look down on me all they wanted. I had been looked down on my entire life. I was used to it. As long as we could get the contracts signed, I could put up with anything. That year, I drank more alcohol than I could remember. I would drink until I threw up, then keep drinking afterward. The worst time, I drank so much that my stomach started bleeding, and I spent 3 days in the hospital. She came to visit me. She stayed for 10 minutes before leaving, saying there was an important meeting at the company. I lay in the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling and telling myself she was simply too busy. During our second year of marriage, the company finally began to improve. She held down the fort at the office while I handled things outside. She managed the finances, and I managed the people. She handled negotiations, and I handled the business dinners. We worked fairly well together. The company expanded from textiles into garment manufacturing, then began developing its own brand. She had excellent instincts. The designs she chose always became bestsellers. I was good at getting things done. I knew exactly which factories could meet tight deadlines and which suppliers offered the cheapest fabric. That year, the company finally became profitable. The profit wasn't much, but at least we no longer had to keep pouring money into it. She took me out to dinner. French cuisine. I wasn't used to it, and I fumbled awkwardly with the knife and fork. She didn't say anything, though every now and then, she frowned slightly. That night, she drank a little and spoke more than usual. George, without you, I might not have made it this far. We're husband and wife, I said. You don't have to thank me. She smiled. That was the first time I had ever seen her smile. During our 3rd year of marriage, the company grew even larger. Our brand gained some recognition locally, and we also launched an official online store. She began traveling frequently and attending all kinds of industry forums and fashion events. Meanwhile, I handled the company's internal problems, managed the employees, supervised production, and chased overdue payments. At the company, everyone called me George. They called her CEO Lou. Sometimes I wondered why she was CEO Lou while I was simply George. Eventually, I figured it out, because in everyone's eyes, she was the real owner of the company. I was merely someone helping her out. That year, we barely ate at home together. She was always busy. I would cook, and she would say she wasn't coming home for dinner. I would wait until the food had gone cold, eat alone, and then wash the dishes. During our 4th year of marriage, the company's annual profit exceeded $8 million. We held a celebration banquet. She wore a beautiful dress and stood on stage delivering a speech, thanking everyone. She mentioned the employees who had been with the company from the beginning, the core team, and our business partners, but she never mentioned me. I sat below the stage holding a glass of red wine, pretending not to care. My co-workers came over to toast me, saying I was an impressive man for marrying such a beautiful and capable wife. I smiled and clinked glasses with them. After the banquet ended, I stayed behind to help clean up. She continued drinking with several longtime employees in a private room nearby. On my way to the restroom, I passed their door. It hadn't been fully closed, and I could hear their voices coming from inside. It was Alex speaking. Chapter 7. Alex was one of the company's earliest employees. He had worked for the Lou family for more than 10 years. He had drunk too much, and his words were slightly slurred. CEO Lou, honestly, wouldn't it have been better if you had chosen Makoto back then? You two were such a perfect match. A talented man and a beautiful woman. That guy might not have been reliable, but at least he was from your world, unlike the one you have now. Before he could finish, someone interrupted him. Someone warned him not to say things he shouldn't. Alex let out another drunken burp and added, I'm just saying it's a shame for you. You're such an outstanding person. How did you end up marrying someone like? He was interrupted again. Then I heard Willow's voice. She didn't argue. She simply let out a soft sigh. That sigh felt like a needle piercing straight into my heart. I stood outside the door, completely motionless. So all this time, I had been the man who was inferior to Makoto. Even though Makoto had run away when she was at her lowest point. Even though I had stayed by her side for 5 years. I turned around and left. That night, she came home very late. I sat in the living room waiting for her. When she entered and saw me, she froze for a moment. Aren't you asleep yet? I couldn't sleep. She changed her shoes, took off her coat, and hung up her bag. Her movements were smooth and practiced. She didn't even glance at me. Did everything go well at the company? Yeah, it was fine. You gave a great speech at the celebration banquet today. She paused before replying. Thank you. You didn't mention me. She turned around and looked at me. What? Your speech. You didn't mention me. She was silent for a few seconds. I thought you didn't care about those things. I really don't care. I stood up from the sofa. I was just wondering if you have ever cared about me at all. A slight change appeared on her face. George, have you been drinking? No. Then why are you saying things like this? What things? Have we not always lived like this? I looked at her. Yes, we've always lived like this. You shine brightly outside, and I clean up everything behind you. You're CEO Lou. I'm just George. You're the heiress. I'm just a nobody who came from the bottom, and we've lived this way for 5 years. You think that's normal, don't you? She didn't answer. Willow, I want to ask you something. Why did you marry me in the first place? She said, didn't we agree back then? I interrupted her, that we would each get what we needed, right? She didn't deny it. I said, then tell me, during these 5 years, was there even a single day when you truly saw me as your husband? She opened her mouth, then closed it again. That small action had already given me the answer. I smiled. Forget it. I understand now. You don't need to explain. Let's just continue living like this. Just like you said, we each get what we need. I turned and walked back to the bedroom. I closed the door and didn't turn on the lights. I sat there in the darkness for a very long time. Then I heard her return to her own room. We had been sleeping separately for a long time. She said she was a light sleeper and that my snoring would disturb her rest. I knew it was just an excuse, but I never exposed it, because I was afraid that once I did, there would be nothing left between us. The 5th year of our marriage arrived. This year, everything had already become a habit. She focused on her career. I focused on my work. We occasionally crossed paths at home, but we were as polite and distant as neighbors. I was still waiting for the day when she would finally become tired enough to stop and look at me, waiting for the day when she would realize that although I, George, was not the person she truly loved, I was the one who had walked the longest road with her. And then she sent that message. He's back. Let's get divorced. Just a few words. They ended our 5-year marriage, and they ended 5 years of me deceiving myself. I sat at the table, looking at the divorce agreement, and suddenly felt completely calm. The greatest sorrow is when the heart has already died. Once the heart is dead, there is nothing left to struggle over. I flipped to the final page of the agreement. Her signature was already there. Her handwriting was beautiful, neat and elegant, just like her. I picked up the pen, but in the end, I didn't sign. Chapter 8. I opened my computer and drafted a new agreement. The wife would leave with nothing. All assets would belong to the husband. After finishing it, I sent it to her email. Then I sent her a message. I didn't sign your agreement. I drafted a new one and sent it to you. Take a look. The message disappeared into silence. 1 hour, 2 hours. She didn't reply. This was her usual tactic. The silent treatment. Every time we had a disagreement, she did the same thing. No talking, no response, no showing up, until I couldn't take it anymore and gave in first. That trick had always worked on me before, because I cared about her, because I didn't want to upset her. But things were different now. I didn't care anymore. I sent her a second message. Willow, I'll give you 3 days. If you don't respond within 3 days, I'll assume you reject the agreement. Then we'll settle this in court. This time, she replied almost instantly. See you in court. That was all. I stared at the screen and laughed. I actually laughed out loud. Fine. Very well. Willow, you brought this upon yourself. I didn't wait 3 days. Early the next morning, I began taking action. The first thing I did was go to the company. Although Willow had been managing the company all these years, most of the employees had been hired by me, especially the core team. Many of them were people I had recruited from my previous industry or people I had met while building connections over the years. They knew me just as well as they knew her. I gathered all the key employees for a meeting. There weren't many of them, only 7 or 8 people, but they were all department heads. I said, the company is going through some adjustments recently. Everyone will take an extended leave. They looked at each other in confusion. Extended leave? Yes, paid leave. I'll cover the cost and send everyone on a trip around the world. Someone laughed, thinking I was joking. George, are you kidding? I'm not. I took out my phone, opened the airline app, and booked 10 tickets to the Maldives right in front of them. First class, 10-day trip, 5-star hotel. Everyone's expressions changed. George, you've all worked with me for 4 or 5 years and have never taken a proper vacation. Consider this a small gift from me. You leave tomorrow. I'll handle the visas. The company will cover all expenses. The room fell silent for a few seconds. Then someone cautiously asked, but what about the company? I'll take care of it, I said. Just enjoy yourselves. No one asked anything else. Adults understood that a situation like this only had 2 possibilities. Either someone was stupidly rich, or something major had happened, and they all knew I wasn't stupidly rich. After the meeting, I called Lisa from finance into my office. Double everyone's salary this month. Pay it from the company account. Lisa looked at me for a moment, then nodded. She was an old neighbor from my hometown. I was the one who introduced her to the company back then. She only trusted me. After that, I called the company security team. Starting today, change the entrance password. The new password will be provided after I give further notice. I hung up and sat in my office, staring at the city outside the window. From here, I could see half of the city district. This office had once belonged to her father. After her father died, the place had been sealed off for half a year. Later, after she received my money, the first thing she did was rent this entire floor again. She said this was the root of the Liu family. She said she would rebuild the Liu family empire here. Looking back now, every word she said had only been about using me. All her persistence, all her struggles, they were for herself and her dead father. They had nothing to do with me. George, I was just a pawn on her chessboard. My phone rang. It was her. I answered but said nothing. What did you do? Her voice was sharp and anxious, completely unlike the elegant Willow I knew. What do you mean? Stop pretending. The company's core employees are all taking leave, and the entrance password has been changed. What exactly are you trying to do? Oh, you mean that? I leaned back in my chair and replied calmly. I gave the employees some time off. They've worked hard for so many years. They deserve a break. You're insane. Do you know how many orders we have to deliver this quarter? How is that my problem? The other end of the phone went silent. George Wang, what exactly are you trying to do? What am I trying to do? I want you to understand that this company doesn't belong to you alone. It's marital property that belongs to both of us. You have the courage to divorce me, so I have the courage to turn this company into an empty shell before the divorce is finalized. Do you dare? Watch me. I hung up. She immediately called again. I declined. She called again. I declined again. Then she sent me a message. I'm coming back to the company right now. Wait for me. I smiled, turned off my phone, and continued sitting in my office, calmly drinking tea. Chapter 9. 2 hours later, she came back. She pushed open the office door and stood there, her chest rising and falling heavily. She must have run all the way up. Willow had always cared deeply about her image. She never lost her composure in public. But today, her hair was slightly messy, and half of her makeup had smudged. George, what exactly are you trying to do? She was almost shouting. I didn't look at her. I continued flipping through the documents on my desk, grinding her teeth. She said, you had someone change the entrance password. There are countless things waiting to be handled at the company. What exactly are you trying to do? I finally looked up. Willow, what did you just say? What am I trying to do? I want you to come back and talk to me face to face. She stared at me. Talk about what? The divorce? Yes. Fine. Then tell me, do you accept my terms? Her expression changed several times. Willow frowned. Don't push your luck. The company's assets weren't earned by you alone. I interrupted her. If not me, then who? Was it you? Then tell me, where did you get the capital to start everything? Who stayed by your side and built this company piece by piece? Who brought you those clients? Who helped you establish those connections? She fell silent. Willow, you've looked down on me from the very beginning. You think I came from the bottom and know nothing. But don't forget, everything you have today was built because I, George, poured real money into it. Now that your Prince Charming has returned, you want to kick me away and let him enjoy everything I built. I'm not that pathetic. She stood at the doorway, her chest heaving even harder. Then her eyes turned red, not from hurt, from anger. George, don't force me. I'm forcing you. I stood up and walked toward her. Willow, these past 5 years, who was forcing whom? You gave me the silent treatment for 5 years. You made me serve you like a servant for 5 years. You kept another man in your heart while expecting me to pretend I knew nothing. Tell me, who was forcing whom? Her eyes were red, but no tears fell. She bit her lip and stared at me fiercely. I will not accept your terms. Then don't get divorced. I'll file a lawsuit. Go ahead. I walked past her and left the office. I said, I'll change the password back, but you'd better hurry, because for every day those company orders are delayed, you'll owe another day of penalties. Her voice came from behind me. You're despicable. I stopped walking. Despicable. I turned around. Willow, 5 years ago, you came to me and said you chose me. You told me you would build a life with me. I believed you. I gave you my entire heart. And what did you do? You made me wait for 5 years. And now you call me despicable. Let me tell you something. You still haven't seen what true cruelty looks like. I left, without looking back. By the time I walked out of the company building, it was already dark. I stood downstairs and looked up at the window of her office. The lights were still on. She was still inside. Maybe she was calling that man. Maybe she was looking for a lawyer. Maybe she was telling her friends what a shameless person I was. Whatever. I took out my phone and scrolled through my photo album. I stopped at a picture from 5 years ago. It was taken shortly after we got married. One afternoon, she unexpectedly didn't go to the company and took a nap at home. I sat beside the bed and watched her for a long time before finally taking that photo. In the picture, she was sleeping soundly. Her eyelashes curled slightly upward, and her lips were gently pressed together. Back then, I thought, this woman is so beautiful. I want to spend my entire life with her. Looking at it now, all I felt was irony. I opened WeChat and posted the photo on my social feed. The caption was, her 5 years ago. Visibility setting. Only one person could see it. Makoto. I didn't know when he had added me. Maybe he had secretly added me long ago, wanting to see how his rival was doing. I never posted anything on social media before. Today, I made an exception. After posting it, I turned off my phone and went to a street food stall to order spicy mala soup. Extra spicy, extra numbing. I ate until sweat covered my forehead. Now this was real food. Half an hour later, my phone lit up. A message came from an unfamiliar account. Mr. Wang, would you be available to meet? It was Makoto. I chewed the beef tripe in my mouth and smiled. He took the bait. Chapter 10. Makoto asked to meet me at a cafe. The place was his choice. It was a boutique coffee shop in the city center, serving single-origin pour-over coffee. 1 cup cost 80 A. When I walked in wearing work pants and an old hoodie, the server's eyes lingered on me for 2 seconds before looking away. Makoto was already sitting in the corner. He wore a light gray cashmere sweater, his hair perfectly styled, with a cup of some expensive-looking coffee placed in front of him. When he saw me enter, he stood up with a polite smile. "Mr. Wong, it's a pleasure to finally meet you." I didn't take his hand. I pulled out the chair and sat down. "Just say what you want." His hand remained in the air for a second before he slowly withdrew it. His smile didn't change. "I just wanted to talk with you." "Talk about what?" "About Willow." I leaned back in my chair and looked at him. This was the man Willow had been thinking about all these years. Her dream man. Her idol. He really did look impressive. His features were refined. His manner gentle and elegant. At a glance, anyone could tell he was a wealthy second-generation heir who had been raised in comfort since childhood. I asked, "What do you want to talk about regarding her?" He said, "I know this is difficult for you to accept. Willow suddenly asking for a divorce would make anyone angry. If I were in your position, I would feel the same. But I hope you can try to understand her perspective." I raised my eyebrows. Her perspective? She hasn't had an easy life these past few years. I almost laughed. Her life hasn't been easy. Was that because of me? That's not what I mean. I mean that when she married you back then, she was forced into that situation. When he said it, his expression was sincere. He genuinely believed he was saying something considerate. Forced into it. I repeated his words. "Yes," he said. "The marriage between you two was based on an exchange of interests from the very beginning. I believe you understand that as well. Now that her career has stabilized, she wants to pursue the life she truly wants. Isn't that only natural?" I asked. "The life she truly wants. A life with you." He lowered his head slightly, revealing a reserved smile. "There are many things between Willow and me that you could never understand." "Then tell me." He froze. I shrugged. "Aren't you the one asking me to understand? Then tell me what kind of earth-shattering love story you and her have." He was silent for a while before speaking. He said that he and Willow were university classmates, that their families had known each other for generations, and that they had even been promised to each other since childhood. He said Willow used to be lively and cheerful. She would act spoiled around him, learn how to cook for him, and skip classes to take care of him whenever he was sick. Makoto said, "Once, I had a fever, and she waited outside my dorm building all night just to bring me a bowl of porridge. It was freezing that night, and her hands were numb from the cold." As he spoke, his eyes softened, as if he were remembering something precious. I asked, "And then?" "Then the Liu family fell into trouble. I continued for him." "So you ran away?" His expression stiffened slightly before he continued. "My going abroad at the time was arranged by my family. I had no choice." I interrupted him. "Of course you had a choice. You could have stayed. You could have helped her. You could have called her. You could have done many things. You don't understand what the situation was like back then." "I really don't." I looked straight into his eyes. "All I know is that when she was at her lowest point, she came to me. I gave her money. I helped her rebuild the company. I stayed with her through the hardest days. And you? You were overseas. You didn't even make a single phone call to her." His expression changed. He said, "The feelings between Willow and me shouldn't be measured by money." Beautiful words. "Then why did you come back now?" He didn't answer. "Let me answer for you. When she went bankrupt, you left. When she became successful, you came back to take the reward. Don't you think you're being a little too shameless?" His lips pressed into a thin line. The polite, refined mask on his face finally showed a crack. "Mr. Wong, I understand your anger, but speaking this way won't help solve the problem." Chapter 11. I said impatiently, "Who wants to solve a problem with you? What problem do you and I even have to solve?" He said, "Willow's problem. She's suffering right now, caught between you and me." I interrupted him. "She's suffering. She could have stayed. She could have cut off contact with you and lived a proper life with me. She chose you, and now you're telling me she's suffering. She brought this upon herself." Makoto took a deep breath and put that polite smile back on his face. In a refined and courteous tone, he said, "I asked to meet you today because I hope we can resolve this peacefully. You spent 5 years of your time and money on Willow. We both acknowledge that. That's why the divorce agreement offers you sufficient financial compensation. 5 million. That's all the cash Willow can provide right now. The company still needs capital to keep operating." I said, "That company was funded by me, but it is still the Liu family's business. Legally, it is marital property." Makoto looked at me, and there was a trace of barely noticeable contempt in his eyes. "Mr. Wong, forgive me for saying this, but do you really want to go to court? With your background, if you go against Willow in a lawsuit, what do you think the media will write? Everyone will find out how you used money to buy this marriage. For you, the 5 million, along with the house and savings, is already a huge fortune. It's enough for you to live a comfortable life for the rest of your life." He spoke gently. His tone even carried a hint of concern, but I understood what he really meant. He was reminding me where I came from, and whether I deserved to stand beside them. I stood up, thinking I was leaving. He stood as well. "Mr. Wong, please listen to the rest. I'm not interested." But I raised my hand and stopped him. Makoto, you spent all this time telling me about your past with Willow. You told me everything she did for you, but have you ever considered this? She has never done anything for me. 5 years. She never cooked a single meal for me. She never stayed by my side once when I was sick. She was always cold, polite, and distant toward me. I used to think that was simply her personality, but now I understand. She wasn't cold by nature. She was only cold toward me. I picked up the coffee sitting in front of him and looked at it. 88 for a cup of coffee. I couldn't afford something like this before, and even now, I still don't enjoy it. But that's not the point. The point is that you sat here holding this cup of coffee, talking to me about love for more than half an hour, and you never even thought about ordering one for me. I placed the cup back down. Then I said, you two are actually very similar. Deep down, you both believe you're superior to everyone else. People like you will never truly think about others. You only care about your own feelings, your own interests, and your own love. I came here today not because I wanted to listen to this nonsense. I wanted to see what kind of person the man she could never forget really was. Now I know. Nothing special. I turned around and walked away. When I reached the door, I looked back once. Makoto was still standing there. His expression complicated. He probably never expected that someone like me, a man who came from the bottom, would dare speak to him that way. Chapter 12. 2 days later, I received a court summons. Willow had officially filed for divorce. I knew her lawyer. Her name was Maria, a well-known family law attorney in the city. Maria called me. Her tone was professional and polite. Mr. Wong, my client hopes to resolve this matter as soon as possible. If you're willing to negotiate, we can sit down and discuss it. Discuss what? The division of assets. My client is willing to make some concessions, I replied. Let her leave with nothing, and I'll agree to the divorce. The other end of the line went silent for 2 seconds. Mr. Wong, with all due respect, there is no legal basis for leaving with nothing. According to civil law, when a marriage ends, property division must consider the rights and interests of the wife and children. She has no children. Generally speaking, assets are divided equally unless one party has committed a serious fault. But even infidelity does not automatically result in completely losing the right to property division. And my client denies any infidelity, I replied. Then we'll see each other in court. Mr. Wong, a lawsuit may not necessarily benefit you. Most of the assets under your name were acquired after marriage. The court will most likely divide them equally, I said calmly. Then we won't divorce. You have the right to refuse divorce, but the court will make a comprehensive judgment on whether the marriage has truly broken down. If one party insists on divorce, I interrupted her again. I know. For the first lawsuit, the court usually won't grant the divorce immediately. It may take another 6 months before a second lawsuit has a chance of succeeding. Maria was silent for a few seconds. It seems you've done your research. A little. Then you should also know that delaying things won't change the final outcome. I laughed softly. Maybe it will. Maybe it won't. But how would we know if we don't try? Attorney Maria, let me remind you of something. Willow is your client, but the money she uses to pay your legal fees is marital property. Half of your lawyer's fee is technically mine. You're using my money to help someone sue me. Do you think that's appropriate? Maria didn't answer that question. Instead, she said, I will convey your opinion to my client. Goodbye. The first court hearing took place 1 month later. I bought a brand new suit specifically for the occasion, but I deliberately bought one size too large. It hung loosely on my body and looked awkward. I didn't style my hair. I only shaved half of my beard. Not because I forgot, because I did it intentionally. Willow wore a black suit. Her hair was tied up, and her makeup was simple and elegant. She looked dignified and vulnerable. Maria sat beside her. The judge was a woman in her 40s wearing gold-rimmed glasses. The plaintiff spoke first. Maria stood and spoke in a restrained manner. The plaintiff and defendant have been separated for a long period due to emotional incompatibility. Their marriage exists in name only. The plaintiff requests that the court dissolve the marriage and divide the marital assets according to the law. Then it was my side's turn. My lawyer was someone I had hired temporarily. He was a young man who had only recently obtained his license. I told him not to say anything. I would handle it myself. The judge asked for my response. I stood up and looked at Willow. She looked back at me with cold eyes. Then I began my performance. Your Honor, I don't want a divorce. When I said it, I deliberately lowered my voice, making it slightly hoarse. My wife and I have been married for 5 years. In these 5 years, I have never done anything to betray her. I gave her control over all the money in our family. When she wanted to start a company, I supported her. I don't understand why she wants to divorce me. Chapter 13. The corner of Willow's mouth twitched slightly. I continued. She says we're incompatible, but I've never even had a real argument with her. Whatever she said went. When she wanted to sleep in separate rooms, I moved to the guest room. I kept waiting for her to figure things out. I thought she was just exhausted from work. I thought once this busy period was over, Things would get better. I never expected her to come to court and sue me. I took a deep breath, making my eyes look slightly teary. Your Honor, I don't want a divorce. I don't want anything else. I only want my wife to come back. I know I come from a poor background. I know I'm not good enough for her, but I truly did my best. I beg you, please don't grant us a divorce. The courtroom fell silent. Willow's expression finally changed. It wasn't because she was moved. It was anger. She probably never expected me to shamelessly act this way. Maria whispered something into her ear, and only then did she manage to suppress her emotions. The judge looked at me, then looked at Willow. Then she announced a recess. 1 week later, the verdict was issued. The divorce was denied. The court determined that the relationship between the couple had not yet completely broken down and rejected the plaintiff's request for divorce. When Willow walked out of the courthouse, her face was cold and furious. As she passed by me, she lowered her voice and said, "You're disgusting." I smiled. Likewise. That night, I received a message. It was from Makoto. "Mr. Wong, what exactly are you trying to do? Dragging this out won't benefit anyone. Willow is suffering right now. Can't you just let her go?" I replied, "Let her go? Why should I? You don't love her. If you love someone, you should want them to be happy." I stared at that message and laughed. This idiot actually had the nerve to talk to me about love. I asked, "Since you believe loving someone means making them happy, then why did you run away back then? Didn't you love her? Where were you when she needed you the most?" He didn't reply for a long time. Then he sent me a paragraph. "I can't change what happened in the past, but now I hope you'll let go. You and her were never from the same world. Forcing something that was never meant to be is meaningless. Even if you keep dragging this out, she will never love you. Makoto, let me tell you a secret." I slowly typed. "Do you really think Willow will be happy with you? Do you think she loves you? She loves the version of you from university, the one who wore white shirts and played basketball, the one who had a powerful family background and status. If one day you lost everything, guess whether she would still love you." "What do you mean?" "What I mean is, you're no different from me. She is also using you. The only difference is that you still have value to her right now." He blocked me. I looked at the red exclamation mark beside our conversation. Then I leaned back on the sofa and closed my eyes. My mind was a mess. I thought about the moment 5 years ago when she stopped me in that hallway. I thought about the first time she smiled at me. I thought about the way she had looked at me throughout these 5 years. Cold, polite, distant. I had kept lying to myself, telling myself that she simply didn't know how to express her feelings, telling myself that she had me in her heart. Now that illusion had finally shattered, and maybe that was for the best. At least I no longer had to deceive myself. Chapter 14. I decided to go somewhere and clear my head. I booked a flight to Australia. There was no special reason. It was simply far enough away. Far enough that when I woke up every morning, I wouldn't immediately think about how she was still in the same city, together with another man. Before leaving, I cleaned up the mess at the company. The employees who had been sent on extended leave gradually returned, but the company's operations had already been completely disrupted. Several longtime clients became furious because of delayed orders and turned against us. Willow was overwhelmed, running around trying to put out fires everywhere. I pretended not to know. She called me once. I didn't answer. Then she sent me a message. Her tone was much softer than before, saying that she wanted to sit down and have a proper conversation with me. I still didn't reply. Australia's winter was pleasantly warm. I rented an apartment on the Gold Coast. Every day, I slept until I naturally woke up, then went for walks along the beach. Sometimes I would sit there for an entire afternoon, staring blankly at the waves. On the third day, I received an automatic text message from the bank. "Your account ending in XXXX has transferred 200,000 renminbi to Makoto." I froze for a moment, thinking I had read it wrong. I opened my mobile banking app and checked carefully. There was no mistake. 200,000. The transfer came from our joint marital account. In other words, Willow had used our shared money to transfer money to her lover. I continued scrolling through the records. 100,000, 50,000, 300,000, 200,000. Starting 3 months ago, she had transferred nearly 2 million in total. Every payment had gone to the same person, Makoto. I sat on the beach, holding my phone. Suddenly, the sea breeze felt cold. She had slept beside me for 5 years, yet she had never even bought me a decent birthday gift. Every time I asked if she wanted to buy something together, she always said the company's funds were tight and we needed to save money. I believed her. For 5 years, I lived frugally. I wore t-shirts that cost only a few dozen. I drove an old second-hand car. Even the alcohol I bought was the cheapest kind, only costing a little over 10. And meanwhile, she was supporting another man behind my back. That night, I booked a flight home. Before leaving, I called my lawyer. "I want to sue and recover the marital assets." Willow transferred a large amount of our shared property to Makoto without my consent. I have records of every single transaction. I want every cent returned. My lawyer said there was no problem. The evidence was solid, and the case was almost guaranteed to succeed. Then I called Maria. She answered quickly. Mr. Wong. Attorney Maria, please inform your client of this. Every payment she transferred to Makoto, I will recover. Additionally, I have already applied to freeze our joint marital account. Starting today, every cent she spends must be approved by me. Maria was silent for a moment. I'll pass on your message. I continued. One more thing. Please tell her congratulations. She spent 5 years finally making me lose the last bit of affection I had left for her. I hung up. When the plane took off, I looked out the window at the Australian coastline slowly shrinking beneath me. My heart was strangely calm. It felt like finally pulling out a rotten tooth that had been hurting for a long time. It hurt, but it was a relief. When I returned home, the apartment was completely dark. I turned on the lights and found the living room in complete chaos. The coffee table was overturned. The vase was shattered. Pillows and magazines were scattered across the floor. My clothes had been thrown out of the closet and were lying everywhere. On the bedroom door was a note. It contained only a few words. Are you satisfied now? The handwriting was messy. She had pressed so hard that the paper was torn. It seemed Willow already knew I had frozen the account. I smiled. I stepped over the mess on the floor, walked into the study, and locked the door. Early the next morning, I was woken by knocking. When I opened the door, Willow was standing there. She wore a white shirt, the collar slightly wrinkled, her hair loosely tied behind her head. It was obvious she hadn't slept well the night before. Chapter 15. Good morning, I said. She ignored me and walked straight into the living room. George, do you really have to do this? Do what? Push everyone to the edge. Freeze the account. Take control of the company. Sue to recover the money. Are you satisfied only if you drive me to my death? I'm driving you to your death. I walked over to the sofa, picked up a pillow from the floor, dusted it off, and sat down. Willow, if you're going to talk, at least be reasonable. You were the one who brought up divorce first. You were the one who transferred money to another man. You were the one who betrayed this marriage. So tell me, who exactly is forcing whom? Her lips pressed into a thin line, and her eyes became slightly red. But this time, it wasn't anger. It was an emotion I couldn't quite describe. I didn't cheat on you. Then tell me, why did you transfer so much money to Makoto? She said nothing. I laughed. After he came back, he had no job, didn't he? He was short on money, wasn't he? He needed you to support him, didn't he? Willow, you really have a talent for choosing men. You married a poor man, and then picked up a man who lives off women. Your taste is truly impressive. Her body swayed slightly, as if my words had struck her. Then she raised her hand and slapped toward my face. I moved aside slightly. Her hand landed on my shoulder. The force wasn't strong, but the anger behind it was intense. She hit me several times. Her movements were messy and uncontrolled. Nothing like the elegant and composed Willow I knew. Who are you to say that about him? Who are you? You don't know anything. You don't know anything about me and him. She suddenly stopped, as if she had realized something. Her entire body seemed to lose all strength, and she stood there frozen. I looked at her. I looked at the woman I had known for 5 years. Her elegance was gone. Her restraint had disappeared. The cold mask she had always worn had been torn apart. She stood there with messy hair and red eyes, looking like a helpless child. But I felt nothing, not even the slightest bit of sympathy. I finally understood. Hating someone was much easier than loving someone. I asked, "Are you done?" She didn't answer. "If you're not done, keep going. But if you are, leave. You've already made enough of a mess in my home. If the neighbors see this and word gets out, it won't look good for CEO Lou's reputation." She looked up at me. There were tears in her eyes, but they didn't fall. Her voice was quiet, almost like she was talking to herself. "You weren't like this before," I said. "The past is the past. The present is the present. Back then, I thought you would love me." Her tears finally fell, but she didn't wipe them away. She let them slide down her cheeks. Then she laughed. "Love? George, you're asking whether I love you? Fine, I'll tell you. I will never love you in this lifetime, and you can stop dreaming that I ever will. You're nothing but a nobody from the bottom. You think having some money can turn you into someone from the upper class? Keep dreaming. You will always be that demolition compensation recipient from an urban village. You will always. Are you finished?" She stopped, but I urged her, "If you're finished, then leave." She stood there and looked at me for a very long time. Then she turned around and left. Her high heels stepped over the broken porcelain pieces on the floor, creating sharp cracking sounds. I remained sitting on the sofa without moving. The sunlight outside was bright. It fell onto the floor, making the shattered pieces of porcelain sparkle. I lowered my head and looked at my hands. Rough, with thick knuckles. Even now, Traces of the work I had done remained beneath my fingernails. She wasn't wrong. I was just a man from the bottom, but this man from the bottom would smash every single one of her carefully made plans. I wouldn't leave her with a single thing. Chapter 16. Half a year later, Willow filed for divorce with the court for the second time. According to the law, after the first divorce judgment denies the request, if the couple has lived separately for 1 year and one party files again, the divorce should generally be granted. But she said she couldn't wait another year. Her reason was, the relationship has completely broken down, and there is no possibility of reconciliation. Her lawyer, Maria, had quite a few connections in the legal circle. I had no idea what methods she used, but the court accepted the case. On the day of the hearing, I arrived on time. When I entered the courtroom, I saw her. After 6 months, Willow had changed a lot. She had lost weight. The suits that once fit her perfectly now looked loose on her body. Her collarbones were much more prominent. Her makeup was still exquisite, but it couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes or her sunken cheeks. Then I noticed her stomach. She was pregnant, about 5 months along. Her belly had already started showing, and even loose clothing couldn't completely hide it. Sitting beside her was that man, Makoto. He wore a dark suit, his expression anxious. He kept checking his phone and occasionally lowered his head to speak with her. She barely responded. She simply sat there quietly, one hand resting on her stomach. I walked over and sat down in my designated seat. As I passed by her, she looked up at me. Her eyes were complicated. There was hatred, there was exhaustion, and there was something else I couldn't describe. I slightly nodded. A simple greeting. The hearing began. Maria represented Willow and made her statement. Her words were even more determined than last time. She presented a large amount of evidence, including their period of separation, their emotional state, and communication records. She attempted to prove that the marriage had completely broken down and that continuing it would only be torture for both sides. When it was my turn, I stood up. Your Honor, I'll say the same thing as before. I do not want a divorce. Maria immediately objected. The defendant claims he does not want a divorce, but over the past 6 months, he has frozen the couple's shared assets, causing difficulties in the plaintiff's life. The defendant even sued to recover what were normal expenses paid by the plaintiff. These actions themselves prove that the defendant no longer has any feelings for the plaintiff. I said, I sued to recover the money she gave to a third party, not normal expenses. Maria replied, that was a loan. A loan. Where is the IOU? How much was the interest? When was the repayment date? Maria was briefly speechless. Then she adjusted her strategy. Putting aside the financial dispute, the marriage between the plaintiff and defendant exists only in name. The two parties have been separated for a long time and have had no substantial marital relationship. I asked, then whose child is the one in her stomach? The courtroom fell silent. Everyone's eyes turned toward Willow's belly. Maria reacted quickly. This is the plaintiff's personal privacy and has nothing to do with this case. I couldn't hold back anymore. How is it unrelated? She's pregnant, which means someone had a relationship with her. That person is not me. So whose child is it? The judge struck the gavel. Defendant, please focus on the disputed issues of this case. But I changed direction. Your Honor, I do not agree to divorce because this child is mine. The courtroom became completely silent. Even Maria froze. Willow suddenly raised her head, her eyes wide. She probably never expected me to say something like that. What nonsense are you talking about? Her voice was sharp and urgent. This child is not yours. The moment the words left her mouth, she realized what she had done. Her face instantly turned pale. The entire courtroom was silent for several seconds. I didn't look at her. I continued speaking to the judge. Your Honor, Willow and I are legally married. She is pregnant, so I have reason to believe the child is mine. Now that she has requested a divorce, I disagree. Whether this is due to emotional instability or pregnancy-related anxiety, I believe there is still a possibility for reconciliation. Furthermore, the child has not been born yet. As her husband and the child's father, I have a responsibility to accompany her through this stage. Bullshit. Willow stood up, her hands pressed against the table, and her entire body was trembling. Your Honor, he's lying. This child has nothing to do with him. The judge looked at her. Ms. Liu, please remain calm. You claim the child does not belong to the defendant. Do you have evidence? I have prenatal examination records. I calmly continued. Prenatal records can only prove that you are pregnant. They cannot prove who the father is. The only evidence that can prove it is a paternity test after birth. The child has not been born yet, so a test cannot be performed. After the child is born, I will accept a paternity test. If the child is not mine, I will accept the result. But before that happens, I will not agree to divorce. Chapter 17. Willow looked at me. Her lips were trembling, and her face was as pale as paper. There was something in her eyes that I had never seen before. Not anger, not disgust, fear. She finally realized what I was doing. You're crazy. she whispered. You're crazy. Maria stood up. Your Honor, the defendant's statement has absolutely no factual basis and is clearly intended to maliciously delay the proceedings. I looked at the judge and said, the law defines the standards for determining whether a marriage has broken down, and it also sets the conditions for divorce. I have not cheated. I have not committed domestic violence. I have not abused her. I do not want a divorce. When the court decides whether to grant a divorce, it should consider the wishes of both parties. Furthermore, there is now a child involved. As a husband, how could I possibly abandon my family before the child is even born? The judge looked at me, then she looked at Willow. She remained silent for a long time before finally saying, this case will be postponed. After the plaintiff gives birth, a paternity test will be conducted, and the court will make a further ruling. She paused. Then she struck the gavel. Court adjourned. When the gavel fell, Willow looked as if all the strength had been drained from her body. She collapsed back into her chair. Maria spoke quietly beside her, but Willow seemed unable to hear a word. Makoto stood up from the gallery. His face was pale with anger. His lips were tightly pressed together, and his fists were clenched so hard that his knuckles turned white. I picked up the documents on the table and turned to leave. As I walked out of the courtroom, hurried footsteps came from behind me. George. It was Willow's voice. Hoarse, like her throat was filled with sand. I turned around. She stood in the middle of the hallway. Makoto was holding her arm. She shook his hand away and walked toward me. She stopped a few steps away. Her eyes were red, but no tears fell. Why are you doing this? You know the child isn't yours, I replied. Because I want you to pay the price. Just because of that. Yes. Her lips trembled. You know I have nothing left. The company is gone. The money is gone. I have nothing anymore. I only have this child. Are you even trying to take that away from me? I shook my head. I'm not trying to take anything away from you. I'm telling you that the debt you owe me, now it's time for you to pay it back. What? 5 years ago, you chose me because you needed money. You sold yourself to me, and now you want to leave. You think it's going to be that easy. You treated me like a fool. Unfortunately for you, I'm not one. She looked at me. Her tears finally fell, but she didn't wipe them away. She simply let them stream down her face. George, you weren't like this before, I replied. Congratulations. You taught me how to grow up. She laughed, a soft, bitter laugh. George, you really are just a petty-minded man from the bottom. You think having some money can turn you into someone from the upper class. Keep dreaming. You will always be that demolition compensation recipient from an urban village. You will always. Are you finished? She stopped. I said again, if you're finished, then leave. She stood there and looked at me for a very long time. Then she turned around and walked away. Her high heels struck the marble floor, one sound after another, fading farther and farther away. Makoto looked at me once. There was hatred in his eyes, but more than that, there was helplessness and despair. He chased after her. I stood alone in the empty hallway, with no one else around. Chapter 18. Life went on. The divorce lawsuit remained unresolved, and both sides' lawyers were still fighting back and forth. The court had postponed the proceedings before the child was born. Neither side could make any move. Her belly grew bigger day by day. Her company's business situation worsened day by day. Her circumstances became harder day by day. I heard that she had rented a place in the west side of the city. Makoto would occasionally go there, but sometimes he would disappear for several days. No one knew when he came or left. She had asked someone to sell some of her jewelry and bags in exchange for some money. I had no idea how long it would last. Those pieces of news reached me through other people. I never asked about her, but there were always people who couldn't keep their mouths shut. I listened, replied with a simple and continued eating when it was time to eat and sleeping when it was time to sleep. 3 months later, I received a phone call. It was from the obstetrics and gynecology department of the 3rd Municipal Hospital. May I ask if this is Mr. George? We're from the 3rd Municipal Hospital. MS. Willow has been admitted here, and her condition is critical. We need a family member to sign some documents. I stood on the balcony with my phone in hand. It was raining outside. The winter rain struck my face, cold like needles. I froze for a long time. I had refused to divorce her just to drag things out, planning to deal with whatever came next. I never expected things to take such a turn. I asked, what happened? The person on the other end replied, premature labor, 32 weeks, placental abruption and severe bleeding. She needs an emergency C-section. The patient is currently semi-conscious, and you are her spouse. I asked, does she have any other contacts? The other person replied, there is only one contact saved in her phone. The name is Ito, but we can't get through. You are her legal spouse. If you could come here. We're separated. Mr. Wong, the situation is very urgent. I added, the child isn't mine. There was a 2-second silence on the other end. Mr. Wong, both the mother and the baby are in serious danger right now. You are the only family contact listed in our system. If no one signs, I replied, I can't sign. Mr. Wong, I repeated. I can't sign this. Doesn't she have anyone else? No, she doesn't, I said. Then follow the hospital's regulations. In an emergency, the hospital can begin life-saving procedures without a family member's signature. Handle it according to your rules. I hung up. My phone rang again. I declined the call. It rang again. I declined it once more. Then I received a text message. Mr. Wong, I'm the nurse who called you earlier. MS. Lou has lost a lot of blood, and the baby's heart rate is dropping. If we don't perform emergency surgery, we may lose both the mother and the child. Please. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I put my phone on silent, slipped it into my pocket, put on my coat, and walked out. The roads were congested. It took me nearly an hour to reach the 3rd Municipal Hospital. The obstetrics and gynecology corridor was lit by pale, harsh lights. The smell of disinfectant filled the air. When the nurse saw me, she hurried over. Mr. Wong. Yeah, please come with me. You need to sign first. She brought me to the nurse's station and handed me a surgical consent form. The pages were filled with dense medical terms: massive bleeding, organ failure, fetal distress, risk of death during surgery. At the bottom was the section for the family member's signature. I picked up the pen. The door to the delivery room beside us was closed. Through it, I could faintly hear the beeping of medical machines and the hurried footsteps of nurses. Someone shouted, "Blood pressure is dropping. Prepare the transfusion immediately." I lowered my head and looked at the consent form. I remembered 5 years ago, when she stood in the hallway and said, "Choose me." Her eyes had been so confident, as if she believed she could hold on to everything she wanted. I remembered every night over the past 5 years when I had fallen asleep alone. I remembered her saying, "I will never love you in this lifetime." I remembered her standing in court with her pregnant belly, gripping the table with trembling hands, asking me, "Do you know that I have already lost everything?" I remembered the sound of her high heels as she walked away for the last time, each step fading farther and farther into the distance. I put the pen down. The nurse looked at me. Her expression changed from anxiety to confusion. "Mr. Wong." I smiled and said, "I won't sign." Chapter 19. What? My tone remained calm. I'm already separated from her. The child isn't mine. I'm not the child's father, so I have no right to sign this. But legally, you are still. I nodded and said, "Legally, she is still my wife, but this child has no blood relation to me. She is carrying someone else's child, and now you want me to sign to save her." The nurse opened her mouth but couldn't say a word. I looked at her and said, "I won't sign this." The corridor fell silent for a few seconds. The nurse's lips moved slightly. "Mr. Wong, both the mother and the baby may not survive. I know someone should take responsibility, but that person shouldn't be me." I turned and walked away. After a few steps, a voice came from behind me. "George." It was a man's voice. I turned around. Makoto came running from the end of the corridor. His hair was messy, his coat was only half on, and even his shoes were not properly worn. When he saw me, he rushed over and grabbed my arm. His voice trembled. "You sign, please, sign. Aren't you her husband? Hurry and sign. The doctor said she's running out of time." I shook off his hand and said, "You sign. You're the child's father." "I can't sign. I'm not her husband." "You know you're not her husband. Did you think about that when you got her pregnant? Why are you begging me? Go beg the doctors. Beg them to start emergency treatment. This has nothing to do with me." "George." His voice broke. Tears suddenly streamed down his face. "I'm begging you. I don't want anything anymore. I'll leave. I'll never appear in front of you two again. Just sign it. I'll give you my life if that's what you want." He dropped to his knees. His knees slammed against the marble floor with a dull thud, and everyone in the corridor turned to look. He knelt in front of me, gripping my pant leg with both hands, his face covered in tears and snot. He choked out, "Please, the child is innocent." I looked down at him and said, "The child is innocent? No, that is the consequence of what you two did. Don't use that to guilt trip me. 5 years ago, when she needed someone the most, where were you?" He looked up at me, his face covered in tears. "You were overseas. You ran away. Now you've come back, destroyed someone else's marriage, stepped all over her husband's dignity, and still expect me to save her. Why should I?" I pulled his hands away from my leg. "Makoto, the thing I regret most in my entire life is that 5 years ago, I stopped walking in that hallway." I walked past him toward the end of the corridor. Behind me came his heart-wrenching cries, as if he were vomiting out every piece of his broken soul. I didn't look back. When I walked out of the hospital entrance, the rain had stopped. The streetlights were on. The ground was wet, reflecting patches of dim yellow light. I stood on the steps and lit a cigarette. My hand trembled slightly. Maybe it was just because the weather was too cold. Chapter 20. 3 days later, the hospital called. Willow died after multiple organ failure. Despite all efforts, the doctors were unable to save her. The baby was lost as well. The hospital stated that they had done everything they could, I replied with a simple and hung up. I stood on the balcony. Across the street, someone was hanging quilts out to dry. The sunlight was warm, and the sheets billowed in the wind before slowly falling back down. One person was gone from this world. For everyone else, nothing changed. As her legal husband, I handled the arrangements. I went to the crematorium alone on the day of the cremation. The staff asked if I wanted to choose a better urn. One made of sandalwood, 3,800. I said, no need, just give me the cheapest one. The urn I received in the end was white, plain, and without any patterns. I carried it out of the crematorium and stood at the entrance for a while. Then I called Makoto. It rang for a long time before he finally answered. Who is this? It's me. She's dead. Her ashes are with me. Do you want them? There was a long silence on the other end. So long that I thought he had hung up. Then he said, where? By the river. He came. It had been some time since we last saw each other. He looked like a completely different person. His hair was messy, with large patches of white. His eye sockets were sunken. His beard was unshaven, and he wore a wrinkled coat with mud stains on his pant legs. When he saw the white urn in my hands, his footsteps suddenly stopped. What is that? I said. Her and your son. He stared at the urn. His eyes slowly turned red. You, I said. Now she belongs only to you. No one will fight you for her. No one will stop you. Take it. No need to thank me. I pushed the urn into his arms. He lowered his head and stared at the white urn in his embrace. His entire body began trembling like a leaf. A broken sound escaped his throat, somewhere between a cry and a laugh. I turned around and walked toward the parking lot. Behind me came his voice. George, you'll die a miserable death. You'll get what you deserve. I raised my hand and waved dismissively. The one who deserves that is you, pretty boy. I didn't stop walking. His cries were heartbreaking, carried far away by the river wind. I got into my car and started the engine. Through the rearview mirror, I saw him kneeling on the ground, holding the white urn. His entire body had curled into a ball, his face pressed against the cold porcelain surface, his shoulders shaking violently. The river wind blew through his hair, revealing roots that had already turned gray. In the distance, the horn of a ship sounded, low and drawn out. I looked away and drove out of the parking lot. The early winter wind rushed in, brushing against my face with a bone-chilling cold. Ahead was a dark road, and beyond it, the faint glow of the distant horizon. I stepped on the accelerator. A new day was about to begin.